Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento. And if you've always heard that word of scale and you've always wanted to achieve scale, then this is the episode for you because we have invited on an incredible guest and fellow entrepreneur that when it comes to scale, this guy knows a thing or two or 100 things about it. So let me introduce you to today's guest. His name is David Frederiksen. David is a seasoned CEO, entrepreneur, and executive coach with more than 25 years of experience in scaling businesses in healthcare, finance, and technology. He's the founder of Tobias Advisors, where he helps founders and leadership teams grow smarter, align faster, and execute with clarity. As a former CEO, he built and exited a healthcare revenue cycle company after raising $16 million. If you think that sounds impressive, well, this next step is even more impressive. He then scaled it to over $250 million in receivables, and he now combines that operational expertise with his certification in scaling up to coach leaders through growth, transition, and organizational transformation. His unique coach build transfer methodology blends hands-on leadership with structured team development, leaving clients with both the results and the internal capabilities to sustain them. And probably what I like the most about David's approach to business, I saw this right on his website, is that he's not just interested in helping you to build a scalable company, he also wants you to build a life that you love. So there's so much goodness we're going to get into. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with David Frederiksen. All right, David, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Heck yes, I'm super excited. You clearly love scale, and I feel like it's a word that's thrown around so frequently in the business world, so we're going to go deeper into that today. But before we get there, take us beyond the bio. Who's David? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
It's a great question. As I told you earlier, I grew up here in Nashville. I came from a medical background family. My father was a cardiologist. My mom taught medical school at Vanderbilt University, and my sister is a clinical psychologist. After one semester of molecular biology in college, I've discovered that the world would be a safer place if I were not a doctor. So to you and your listeners, you're welcome. But I did love healthcare. It's kind of in my blood, and so I stuck with it. I went to Vanderbilt to get my MBA, and I've been in healthcare ever since. Helped structure different companies, did some consulting, did healthcare informatics, started a few companies in the finance space, and most recently I founded and ran a medical billing company called Patient Focus, and ran that for about 15 years before exiting in 2023.
Yeah, I really love that overview, especially because, David, here in the US, obviously, we very much understand that healthcare is a business, just like every other business. But what I find so interesting about the attitude towards healthcare or towards education or towards other industries that people forget, yeah, this is an industry that publicly benefits all of us. However, it's also a business, and there are certain universal truths in business that as executives, as founders, we really have to adhere to and we really have to master. Talk to us about that, because you clearly fell in love with the business side of healthcare as well, and a lot of business principles, like I said, they're universal there. Talk to us about your attitude towards going into healthcare, applying that business mindset and saying, hey, we're not just going to build a business that does great things, we're going to build a successful business that sustains itself.
Sure. When it comes to healthcare, it's really an interesting industry in that the economics don't make a whole lot of sense, especially when you compare it to other industries. In healthcare, you have patients who are the end users of the products and services, but they have very little to no influence over the economics or who pays for it. In other words, it's insurance that pays for everything, not the patient themselves. So you have someone else, you're using someone else's money, and that creates all kinds of natural conflicts. Patients are not don't suffer the consequences of the decisions they make relative to their health care. For example, if you speed on the way to Hardee's, you'll get a ticket from a police officer, and then your insurance rates will go up for your car insurance. If you eat Hardee's for breakfast and lunch and dinner, nothing happens to your insurance premiums. So the moral of that story is don't speed on the way to Hardee's. It's a fascinating industry. There are so many constituents throughout. One side of healthcare's business that benefits from a product or a service or an innovation directly and negatively impacts another. And so it's a very complex web of different parties that are all intertwined and all have to work together, but are oftentimes in conflict. It's a fascinating place to work. And quite honestly, when I look at other industries and I work with other clients in other spaces, the economics are very cut and dry and very simple to understand. You've got a customer who makes a decision to purchase something or lease something or engage in something, and they receive the benefit of that, and there's a cost quality trade-off. Healthcare, it doesn't quite work that way, and so it's been a fascinating career. I've absolutely loved it, but I think moving into coaching and helping companies scale is infinitely more fun than anything I've done in the past.
Yeah, David, it didn't take long for that S word to pop up in our conversation of scale. We've got to start there because obviously it's at the heart of so much of what you experience in your healthcare life. And obviously it's so much of what you bring to the table for all the various clients that you work with in different industries. How do you define scale? Because I remember I started my first business as a teenager, and back then I thought, oh, scale just means doing more with less. And the more I've matured as an entrepreneur and as a leader, I realized, no, it's doing a heck of a lot more. Also with more. You want to grow in all the different ways. Talk to us about your approach to scale and what we so often get wrong when it comes to talking and thinking about scale.
Sure. I have a real simple way of looking at scale, and it's every time it takes you and your team, every time your team grows to the point where you need 2 more pizzas to feed your team, you've got to do things differently. You've got to communicate differently. You've got to solve problems differently. You've got to work with clients differently. You've got more people. You've got more complexity. Communication is harder to make sure that information gets all the way up to the top and all the way down to the bottom and back throughout your company as you grow. Most companies, if they're growing like crazy, which is a great problem to have, grow at this rate. The problem is their teams and their processes are growing at this rate, and they can't keep up. Perfect examples. When I launched my company, I number one, I did everything, and then started to bring on a team to help me do things. I did all the invoicing for Patient Focus, and one invoice took me about 3 weeks, and I did it all in Excel. When we got a second client, that was obviously not sustainable. That's a pretty blatant example of what it means to scale. You've got to find a better way to do the things that you did before, because you've got more volume, you've got more people, you've got more constituents, you've got more things at stake. And when that happens, you've got to do things differently. Doesn't mean that what got you here wasn't fantastic. It got you here. That's to be celebrated. But what got you here is not going to get you to the next step. And that's where scaling comes in, is identifying and focusing on those processes, the people in your company that you need to develop and encourage and take to the next level.
David, I want to pick on that example of you manually doing invoicing and taking way too long there, because it's something that we all experience, especially right out of the gates in any new business, is that we are doing things in a very unsustainable and lack of scale way. However, I've long argued that doing those things that don't scale up front, that's what's going to give you a business worth scaling. You've obviously experienced this at so many different levels, so many different industries, and with so many different businesses. So hindsight is always 2020. David, what's your response to founders and to entrepreneurs and to executives who are wondering, should I think about scale from the very beginning? Should I do those things that don't scale at the beginning in order to give me an appreciation and understanding of these things? How do we blend those two? Because there's value in both ways, but I'm super curious strategically how we should be making those decisions early on.
Sure. There's 4 fundamental decisions that drive a company, and that's strategy, execution, people, and cash. Scaling and growth consumes cash. So if you are trying to scale a company and you don't have a lot of cash, okay, what can you do? What do you need to do to be successful, to scale the company? And a lot of that means doing it yourself. A lot of that means, picking up a shovel and you start digging when, you could use a backhoe, but you're not ready for one. So scaling is something to keep in mind. But when you're just starting out, it is a street fight, and you are clawing and scratching, trying to get that first customer, trying to get something, a provable model, a minimum viable product, something that you can build a business around. So you will get to scaling. But first, you have to have a business worth scaling, to your point. And a lot of times that is an absolute mess. And it's a fight. You're clawing, you're scratching, but you're making headway. And as soon as you can get a customer, which is really the absolute goal of a company, is to get a customer, keep a customer. And once you do that, then you start to create processes. And even when you're just clawing and scratching, there's a process in there. It's not very efficient, but you have one. You ended up getting that first customer. So again, that's to be celebrated. However, how are we going to get the next one? And how are we going to then service those two? How are we going to keep them happy and keep the churn down? Because getting a customer is tough, and it is a lot easier to keep a customer than it is to get a new one. So keep your customers happy, go get another one, create the processes you need to sustain them so you can keep doing it better and faster.
Yeah, so well said. Now, I'm going to pick on that last point. I knew that we'd talk about it in some capacity today, because for every entrepreneur, I think also generationally, each generation is more and more impatient than the generation before them. And David, we live in a world where everyone wants everything right now. So let's talk about speed, because that's something that I find that people in their impatience never achieve the point of scale, because they're not willing to do those things fundamentally before it can actually scale. What's your approach towards speed? Because obviously speed of execution matters, ability to get to that point of scale in systems matter, but it does require an ounce of patience. How do you help people navigate that concept of speed?
That's an interesting question, and I was just writing something on this. There's three things to execution if you think about it. Three elements. There's speed, there's cost, and there's quality. And the answer to that is you pick two. You can't have all three. If you want it cheap and fast, it's not going to be that good. You're trading off on quality. If you want it fast and you want it good, it's just not going to be cheap. So those are the things that you're dealing with. So you have to be conscious of that decision. If you need something fast, okay, what's going to give, cost or the quality? And if you're building a product for customers, you have to keep an eye on the quality. At the same time, you can't break the bank. So scaling with speed requires investment, and to do it well, to do it right, to maintain that quality.
I want to ask you this, because we have entrepreneurs on the show from all different industries, all different types of business models. And David, this is something that I've heard from listeners that they really struggle to grasp is, okay, investment is growth fuel, having capital is growth fuel, but how do I use it? Especially in today's day and age with the mass adoption of AI and the increasing powers of AI, we have so much more capabilities and so much more capacity at our disposal, but there's still that element of how much human capital do I take on? How much do I throw at marketing and advertising? You've obviously gone the fundraising route before, and you've maximized that to grow far faster and far bigger than the investment that you've taken on. What's your attitude towards taking on capital and using that capital in the right way?
Again, that's a great question. I raised $16 million from angel investors. I do not recommend doing that. Here's the issue with angel investors is one, they're fantastic, and they're investing in you because they believe in you. The problem you're going to run into with angels is they do not have deep pockets. They're not institutions. They're not prepared, and they didn't intend on making second, third, and fourth round investments. You're going to need more capital. So going back to those investors for more investment means you have to go get more angels. And in the process of doing so, you'll end up diluting yourself. pretty severely. There is a time and a place to pull the trigger on institutional investment. That's a VC or a private equity firm or a family office. Those are the organizations that have deeper pockets and can ride with you as you grow. For instance, I'm working with a client now that is about to sign some very, very large contracts with some large healthcare institutions. And once those close, he's going to need a wad of cash to take on those clients. And so that is a great story to invest in. That is what private equity and institutional investors are looking for. So that's when you want to pull that trigger. A lot of institutional investors don't want to invest in startups, pure startups. That is a friends and family round. That is loans secured by your house. For instance, I mortgaged my house about 3 times to fund Patient Focus and get it off the ground. That was a fun conversation with the family, but we got it done and got the company to profitability and could unhook that lien on my house. But you got to do what you got to do. So raising money is a full-time job. It can completely consume you. One of the things I learned early on was there are folks out there who can help. The investment bankers. There are some that work for Goldman Sachs, and they're solely motivated. That work for larger firms. They're motivated by doing a transaction, which may not be in your best interest because their time frames are different than yours. So I've seen success. I've had success with smaller investment bankers who are more relationship driven, and they know where the investors are that would invest in the types of companies that I was running. So there's all kinds out there. They're investment bankers who specialize in air ambulances. It's something that niche-y. So it's a function of finding those people to help you navigate the path. Again, it's cheap, faster, good. You hire an investment banker, it may cost you an investment, on the money that you raise, but you're going to get there a lot faster, and likely the terms you're going to receive are going to be a lot better than they would be if you went out on your own.
David, that's going to perk a lot of listeners' ears up hearing the fact that you mortgaged your house 3 times. And that obviously, I'm sure even for you, it was very scary to do that. So, but these are the uncertainties that all of us are faced with in different capacities, maybe not mortgaging your house for all entrepreneurs and founders and executives. So I've got to ask you this question for those listeners who are feeling a little bit uneasy even hearing you talk about that. What were those signs? What were the sources of confidence that made you say, yeah, I believe in this to the point? Because David, let's face it, all of us in our entrepreneurial journeys, we feel a sense of imposter syndrome. Why is it me? Am I the one who's going to be driving this forward? Is this going to work? There's so much uncertainty in this journey. So take us to that decision and that level of confidence of saying, no, I'm going to burn the boats because I know this is going to work. What did that look like?
Yeah, well, when I started, I liquidated my 401k at a severe penalty. That was fun. I mortgaged my house to invest in it to hire people. The thing about entrepreneurs is they drive full speed towards the edge of the cliff, and with every ounce of conviction that either the car is going to fly or there will be something to drive on. That's what makes entrepreneurs. We're all a little crazy, but you have to believe in what you're doing, like gravity. And if you don't, maybe it's not such a great idea, because your attitude, your belief in it is infectious, and you want your team to believe in it as well. And believe me, culture comes from the top down. And if there's an ounce of doubt in your mind, your team is going to feel it too. And, managing your team and getting them on board and getting them excited about moving the ball forward and making those sacrifices and working really hard, it takes belief, and you want your team, to believe it. So, it's important to believe in what you're doing. If you have a doubt, well, go figure it out. Go, keep doing the research, keep talking to customers, potential customers, talk to them, ask them the same questions. Would you use this? What would you pay for it? If you had $100 to invest in research and development, Where would you spend it? Where is this in your priority list? That's always a great question. I mean, I've pitched things to physician practices and hospitals and said, okay, what do you think of this? Oh, this is great. Well, okay, cool. What would you pay for it? Pay for it? I wouldn't pay for it. I was like, well, okay, why not? That was a problem. So my point is, you have to believe in it like gravity, and go find more people that believe in it with you, and just keep running.
Yeah, so well said, David. This is also why I often say in entrepreneurial circles that belief, sometimes it can start out as delusion, but being delusional helps us out of the gates because it gets us to that point of that confidence, that certainty, that belief in the face of maybe a lack of evidence. We have to believe it before the rest of people can believe it and see it. And I love the fact that you really emphasize that this stuff has to happen not only externally, but internally with our teams. This is so important. And I want to use that as a segue to switch gears a bit and talk directly about what you do within Tobias Advisors, because I know that you have a really unique methodology, the coach, build, transfer methodology. I'd love for you to take us behind the scenes into what that looks like, because you've experienced this firsthand, and it's fun to talk about your entrepreneurial journey, but it's a different skill set to be able to inject that into other founders, executives, entrepreneurs, leaders, and of course, those cultures in those companies.
Sure. The coach build transfer model it starts off with coaching. It's sitting down with the leadership team and drilling into where they want to be. Where do they want to go in 3 years, 5 years? What numbers do they use to keep score? How do they measure success? And figure out, okay, what do you want those numbers to be in 3 years? What has to be true of the company in 3 years to hit those numbers? And then let's work backwards. Let's reverse engineer this. Oh, okay. What do we need to do? What do you want those numbers to be in 1 year? What are the annual initiatives that we as an organization need to complete over the next 12 months to hit these numbers? And then back into a 90-day sprint, a quarter. All right. What are the priorities for the quarter that are aligned with the annual initiatives for the year and the capabilities that you want to have in 3 years to hit those numbers? Okay, so you reverse engineer a process to get you there. And then you assign accountability. In other words, and accountability is a word that gets a lot of bad rap. It is not blame. It is, okay, I'm going to do this. You're going to do that. What can we do to help each other? Let's go. And then, because when you are assigned ownership of a task or a priority, that doesn't mean you are the one necessarily doing all the work. It means that you are responsible for getting it done. So you assign ownership, that holds people accountable. That's fantastic. Now here's where the build comes in. So oftentimes you have really small companies that can't afford to bring on somebody, at full salary, or they don't have the people in place right then and there to build something. So I will step in and help them on a fractional basis. If they don't have a COO, I can step in and say, okay, let's build this. Build those components, build those processes that will get them to complete their quarterly priorities, get them to complete their annual initiatives, and then train the existing people or help the teams find and hire the right people. And then I transfer that back to them and say, okay, here it is, it's running. Here's how this works. Here's what success is. Here's how it's measured. And here's how you will be measured along the way. So I transfer that back. So I've coached them. We figured out where we want to go. I help them build the processes and systems in place to help them get there, and transfer to ownership of those processes back to those people. And I go back to coaching, and we just reconvene every quarter. Say, how are we doing? What can we do? How can we make this better? How can we run it faster? That's the coach, build, transfer model.
I love that approach, David, especially because hearing those timelines, there's so much that we can do in 90 days. I think that we often underestimate the power of what a quarter means. And you and I are having this conversation as 2025 is racing to a close and the new year is right around the corner. And I want to use that to ask you about timeline and strategic planning, because I know everybody has different time horizons that they look at. I know that everybody has different ways of planning for what their year is going to look like. And P.S. listeners, it doesn't have to wait for January 1st. You can always make any date your own January 1st. But David, since January 1st is right around the corner at the time of this episode airing, what is that time horizon that you look at, and how do you structure that strategic plan to set companies up for success?
Sure. One of the things that I've often do with clients is out of the gate is just a 90-day sprint. It's like, okay, you are the CEO is typically carrying way too much on his or her shoulders. It's called owner dependency, and everything kind of runs through that person, and it's a bottleneck, and it's a terrible place to be. I have been there, and you get burned out quickly because you think, if I just work harder, maybe I'll work faster. I put in more hours, we'll get there. Yeah, well, hard work is certainly a part of it, but that doesn't always work. You need a team, and you need a system to delegate and hold people accountable for executing. So that's a real big part of it. I guess the time frames. I break things into quarters, and so it's amazing what you can do in 90 days. And with a team that is just they're spinning their wheels, they're not feeling very confident, they're starting to slow down, maybe they've plateaued, sales aren't going as well as they can. It's like, okay, time out. Let's talk about what we need to accomplish in the next 90 days. There are things that are strategic. In other words, we want to get there, but there's also some things that you need to do today. I worked with a healthcare company down in Florida, and they had a licensing issue with Medicare. That was the number one priority for the quarter. It wasn't really part of their long-term goal, but if they didn't get the license, then they're out of business. So the quarterly priorities are a blend of what are the things you absolutely have to do that you have a deadline on to keep your business, your doors open, as well as what are some of the things that you can start aligning for your longer-term goals. And to your point, there's a lot you can do in 90 days. And one of the exercises I take people through is, if we come up with a priority for a 90-day sprint, so this is what we're going to do. Okay, let's break down that priority into the actual tasks, the detailed minutia of what it'll take to execute that priority. The example I always give is, okay, when I'd say, all right, who took driver's ed? All right, we did an exercise in driver's ed where we had to write down every single step in what it takes to get in the car, drive to the store, and come back. And so you would say, stick the key in the car, open the door, get in the car, put on your seatbelt, go through every one of these steps. Inevitably, there was somebody along the way who would, drive to the store and come back without ever having gotten in the car. So let's apply that logic to your quarterly priority, what you are trying to do, and within the next 90 days, and write down every single task in that process. Painstakingly write it down, and then assign an owner who's going to complete that task and a deadline. When does that task need to be done? So that when they get to work in the morning, they know exactly what they need to do. It's all written out for them. They just need to start executing. Now, granted, they have other things to do. They have to keep the lights on, but they also have these strategic initiatives that they're undertaking, and they can execute because they've taken the time to plan. They've taken the time to write down the steps so they can just start doing and don't have to really think about, all right, what do I need to do today? It's all right there.
Yeah, I love that approach and the way you think through that, David, and especially the way you articulate it, because it fits right in line with a concept that I've always been fascinated by. It's a saying, I don't know who originally said it. It certainly wasn't me, but the concept is you're always building two businesses simultaneously, the one that you have today and the one that you're going to have 5 years from now. And it's really that blend, that compartmentalizing, but also, of course, understanding how all these things fit together of, hey, we've got to exist and we need to operate today, but we're building for the strategic vision of it. So it's really cool. And to me, as an executive and as a founder, it's also what makes it so much fun, is that we're constantly solving these puzzles and making it all fit together long term. So David, I knew that time would fly by with you today, but I've got to put you on the spot the way that I do at the end of every episode. And that is asking you, what's your number one piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and also knowing that you are one of us, you're a fellow entrepreneur. What's that one thing thing that you want to leave them with today?
Wow. When it comes to evaluating a market, knowing that you're building something for a group of customers you're targeting, it's really, really important to distinguish the difference between need and demand. Need is essentially you've noticed something in the marketplace where your product or your service, it could be used widely. And that's great, but that doesn't necessarily mean that anybody is willing to pay for it. Demand is taking that same need, but there are customers willing to pay for it. They're willing to take out their wallets and pay. Those are fundamentally different things. I ran a business that was loaning money to small critical access and rural hospitals across the country. Some of these hospitals were built after World War II. One I toured was made out of wood. You couldn't even get a wheelchair down the hall. This thing needed to be rebuilt. Did they have a need to do it? Absolutely. Were they begging for money to rebuild their hospital? No, they weren't. They were afraid to make a decision because the people who ran those hospitals were so ingrained in the community, they were paralyzed by the fear of making a bad decision, so they didn't. So there was no demand for this. We had $2.5 billion from Citigroup to go lend to these rural hospitals across the country. And there was a definite need. I could go on for hours on how much need there was. Was there a demand? No, not really. We ended up selling the company to Raymond James and moved on to other greener pastures. So need and demand, understand the difference and make sure that you are leaning towards the demand side.
Yes. Ooh, David, a piece of advice that comes from within the trenches. I absolutely love the way that factored into your own lived experience as a founder. And I very much appreciate the fact that you're passing that on to our worldwide audience so we can learn through your experiences. That's the power of entrepreneurs sharing these conversations publicly. So super grateful for you coming on, and also very excited for listeners to go deeper into all the amazing things that you're doing, that you're putting into the world. I'm super appreciative of the way that you show up in what you do. I quoted something from your website to really kick today's episode off, and I so appreciate your approach to scale, your approach to also making sure that we're building a life that we love as well. So David, for listeners who want to find you online, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Great. My website's tobiasadvisors.com. You can reach me at david@tobiasadvisors.com, and I'm on LinkedIn under David Frederiksen. So look forward to talking to you.
Yes, and listeners, you already know the drill. We're dropping those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. I would imagine that there's more than one David Frederiksen on LinkedIn, so don't worry about finding this one. We are linking directly to this one and only David Frederiksen down below in the show notes. So if you want to reach out to him, continue the conversation, send him, connect him to somebody that you feel like you know they need his assistance. You hear how much he loves business at the fundamental level. So don't be shy in checking out those links down below. Otherwise, David, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.